Hello, my name is Brandon Garzez, and today I'm going to be presenting about my honors capstone project working with the Lifelong Learning Lab as a research assistant. So first, a little bit about myself. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'll be graduating in December of 2021, which is about 10 days as of this recording, with my Bachelor of Science in Computer Science. I'm also going to be getting a minor in entrepreneurship. And in addition to being a part of the engineering honors program, I'm also going to be part of the Eta Kappa Nu Beta Epsilon chapter, which is the IEEE Honor Society here at U of M. And on top of all of that, I'm also a big fan of Michigan football. And yes, I mean a big fan. You may recognize the date and needs no further explanation. So a little bit about the Lifelong Learning Lab. So we're researching the human-computer interaction, learning sciences, and artificial intelligence and how those all come together. The goal is to help people gain knowledge and acquire skills more easily and more efficiently. And the way we're doing that is by developing techniques and technologies that support and optimize human learning. So ultimately, the overarching goal is to learn how humans learn and then optimize for that. So my faculty advisor for this project is Professor Shu, an assistant professor in computer science engineering. She has received a Master of Education in Technology from Harvard. In addition to that, also has her PhD in human-computer interaction from Carnegie Mellon, and then was hired as an assistant professor here at U of M back in January. So I have the privilege of being one of the first projects. And so how I got involved with the Lifelong Learning Lab, it started in January of 2021 when I was taking the EECS 445 undergraduate course, which is machine learning. And going into that class, I didn't expect that I would be doing research at all, let alone for my capstone project. But I was really interested in the topics and the technologies. And so I reached out to my professor, one of the professors, Professor Weens, about doing research. And she referred me to Professor Shu, saying that she was new hire at U of M and would be looking for undergraduate research assistants. So I interviewed with Professor Shu in August. We determined that I would be a good fit for the project. We set up a timeline, and the rest is history. So the project that I was particularly working on was called Upgrade, which is sourcing student open-ended solutions to create scalable learning opportunities. And what that means is students and teachers often use open-ended questions, very popular and very useful. However, they're difficult to grade and difficult to create. So this Upgrade website logs student-written open-ended solutions, and then those solutions are then segmented into different sections based on how the instructor sets up the rubric and the templates for that questions. And then those sections are then mix and match to generate new questions based on the instructor specified schema. And you can read more about this in the paper that I have linked on the slide. So what I personally was responsible for developing includes condensing the modules that make up the student-facing side of this Upgrade technology into one application. So as it existed when I started working on this project, there were 3 primary modules, plus the opportunity to create many more. Each of these modules were individual Django applications, web applications. And the objective is to combine them all into a single web application that contained all of the modules and allows users to navigate easily and intuitively between them. In addition to that, also one of the goals of this project is to add the ability to easily and seamlessly incorporate new modules into the application. And this would require templating not only the modules, but also the backend code running on the servers of the website, in addition to writing the HTML in a way that allows for new modules to be easily plug and play into the website. So it'll allow you to add new modules without having to do a ton of work. So the project timeline started back in September. It took me about a month to get set up and familiar with the code base and the environment and to get started. Starting around October, I started working on getting one module to work with very generalized code. And what I mean by generalized code is, as I said before, these modules were individual projects. So I took one of these module applications and used it as a base. And I took that baseline and I tried to generalize some of the code so that when I would add additional modules to it, they would work well together. So once I thought I had a good enough job of generalizing the code, I began working on merging two modules together. And I started doing that around late October. And so by merging these two modules together, I had to continue to generalize the code, make sure that everything was templated in a way that allowed the same files and the same schema to go together, even though they came from two completely different applications. Finally, after completing that in late November, I began testing with users, receiving feedback on the navigation in the project. And upon completion of my user testing, I worked on incorporating a third module into the additional two that I had already started with to create a 3-module setup, in addition to also incorporating some of the recommended changes based on my user testing. And so the results of my project begin on the left with the navigation page. So this module selection page allows a student to go in and select which module they would like to enter. And when they hit the submit button, they will be navigated to, as you can see on the right, one of multiple module pages. I've included 2 sample modules here on the slide. You can see they're very similar in both design and also setup, and that's very intentional. Part of the templating and generalizing of the code was such that new modules will just plug directly in the same format, same template, same everything. And also very intentional with a user design perspective. Once you learn how to use one module, you've learned how to use all of the modules. So in addition to setting up that front end to be modularized and templated, the back end with the databases also was set up to be modularized and templated. And so what I mean by that is whenever these Django web applications were individual applications, they were also individual databases, one for each of them. And so my job was to, in addition to consolidating the front end and the websites themselves, also consolidating the database way in the back so that no matter what module the user selects, the website application only needs to go to one source to get all of the questions, feedback, data, all of that. And one of the other benefits of having a consolidated database is that when I want to add a new module, it can be added to the database directly from something like a CSV file with all of the information imported in, put directly in the database, and it's all ready to go. Allows for much easier plug and play with these modules. So after completing this project, looking back, there are several things that I've learned and reflected upon throughout my experience. First of all, very proud of the fact that I was able to build a functional application. I think as engineers, a lot of times, we get into the habit of being very excited to start projects. However, we get burned out or bored, or we just hit a wall and we fizzle out and the project dies. So being able to build a functional application from start to finish, very useful, very exciting, and just having that project experience, reflecting back on it, something that I'm very glad that I had the opportunity to learn how to do. In addition to that project management, also learning the Django framework is very useful. Having taken the web development class here at U of M, I have familiarity with the Flask framework, which is another web development framework. So being able to learn both of these allowed me to see how they're similar, and in that way, learn about some of the overarching principles of web development, but it also let me see how they were different and how you can apply those general principles into different specific scenarios. So in addition to learning Django, I also had the opportunity to work with jQuery, which is an extension of JavaScript, which basically enables the websites to be dynamically updated without having to hit the refresh button. You can change what you're looking at without having to refresh the whole page. So being able to use that powerful tool and learn how to incorporate it into a real project, I'm very glad I had the opportunity to learn how to do that. And finally, I really learned that I love web development with this project. I had a feeling that I would really enjoy and love web development because I really enjoyed the web development course here at U of M. But upon working on this project and upon completion of this project, working with a real world project outside of the classroom showed me that not only am I capable and able to complete a web project, I also love doing it. And it's something that I could see a career coming out of for myself. Unfortunately, not all of my reflection is positive. There was a lot of learning to be done from this project, starting with time management. Referencing back to my project timeline, a lot of those blocks at the beginning of my project were very long, taking a month, 3 weeks, what have you. And at the end, I was left with only a week to do user testing and only a week or so to do the third module and fix the bugs that I had found from the user testing. So if I could do this over again, I would start by planning out my timing a lot better. trying to leave myself more time to do things like fix bugs, user test, perhaps even a second round of user testing based on the feedback that I received from the first one. In addition to the time management, I also had to refactor my code many times due to taking a greedy approach of developing this application. And what I mean by a greedy approach is, as I mentioned earlier, I started with a single module as a standalone application, and I modified that. And then I worked to building two of them together into one. And then after I got that working, I built a third one into those two. And so when I did each of those combining and I integrated multiple 2 modules, 3 modules together, I did it in a greedy way where I was just trying to get them to work. I would take shortcuts. I would violate various best practices for coding in the name of, let's just get it to work now, and I'll figure out all of these details and implementation things later. And what that ended up causing me to do is when I went to integrate, say, perhaps the first modules together, and then I go to get the third one, I had to undo a lot of the code that I had written because I wrote bad code that took advantage of shortcuts that didn't actually generalize well. It wouldn't allow me to achieve that plug and play that I was referring to earlier. So if I could redo this again, I would take more time to plan out and be very intentional with every step that I take along the way, instead of just figuring it out as I go. And speaking of figuring it out as I go, I also feel like I dove in to this project without fully understanding all of the pieces that were moving. I was very excited to be working with Django, a new framework, web development that I loved, and just being passionate about the project as a whole. I was very excited to dive in and start working. However, I felt like I really hindered my development because I forced myself to learn as I went, which I'm not necessarily opposed to. However, the downside to doing that is that I made a lot of mistakes learning as I programmed. And so I wrote a lot of bad code, and I ended up having to fix a lot of my mistakes later in the project and in the semester that I committed earlier. Whereas if I had spent more time asking questions, doing research, and learning about all of the moving, complicated parts of this project, it would allow me to do it right the first time, and I wouldn't have to waste time undoing and redoing my work. So the next steps with this project, though I am graduating at the end of this semester, I hope to be able to continue working on this project in any way that I can, starting with improving the look and feel of the site with CSS. It's very basic right now, and I would love to be able to spice up the website, make it more visually appealing and a little bit more dynamic for users. In addition to that, with regards to the database, although I was able to modularize and template it together very well, there still are a lot of shortcuts and special cases within the database and within the website as a whole. I wish I could continue, and I hope to be able to continue modularizing and templating and generalizing the code so that it works seamlessly with any new number of modules. If I want to add in a fourth module, a fifth module, as many modules as I want, I could do that very seamlessly and very easily with beautiful, well-templated, well-generalized code. So those would be, I think, the next steps if I were to continue working on this project, which I hope I have the opportunity to do. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email at bgarzez@umich.edu. And thank you very much for listening. Have a good one.